My name is Calvin Ayre. Welcome to the Sean Newman podcast.
Welcome to the Sean Newman podcast. Today, I'm joined by Billionaire Calvin Ayre. I don't know if that ever gets old hearing that introduction or not. Does it, Calvin? But first off, I guess thanks for joining me.
Yeah. Well, actually, I don't know if it gets old or not. I actually don't really think about it too much. I'm usually really focused on all the stuff I'm doing in my life, so I don't really think that way much myself. But yeah.
Well, fair. I want to go back. I got told your story probably 8 months ago, and I thought, man, there's no way I'm ever going to track down a guy with that's seen the things you've seen, been the places you've been, and then I finally make the email, and it takes a little bit of jostling and getting there, but here we are. So I thought maybe you could take us back to Lashburn, growing up on a pig farm to begin with, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you remember your own youth, and you remember those moments where you started to get sort of conscious memory of your own reality. All that stuff happened on a pig farm in Saskatchewan, like I said, about 5 miles northeast of Lashburn. And because that was the only thing that I'd ever experienced, that kind of seemed to be the normal way of life. And going to school, once I started school for the first 6 years of my life, I was there as well. Most of the kids that I met lived on farms in the surrounding area. So it all seemed very normal at the time.
Where did you go to school in Lashburn? Do you remember the school by chance? Was it J.S. Moore?
What? It was Lashburn Elementary School.
Lashburn Elementary? Because that would have been about 1970?
I would have started about 67.
67. Okay. So where do you go after, no, let's go back to this. So you're on a pig farm.
Mm-hmm.
The internet isn't even a thing yet, let alone.
Neither was color TV.
So were you always into, I don't know, gambling or? Yeah,
actually we used to gamble, my friends and I, since we were quite young. And it was quite a normal thing. I mean, hockey players, I was a hockey player, and the hockey players, we used to always gamble. A lot of poker, actually, and blackjack.
Riding in the back of the bus.
Yeah, and in hotels, and just killing those long runners.
Where did you play hockey?
I started in Lashburn, and then I finished playing in Salmon Arm, and I played defense for the University of Waterloo Warriors in my university years as well.
Really? What level would Waterloo be?
College, university, Canadian university level.
Was it CIS then?
Ooh, I mean, that was a long time ago, but it was the varsity team. I mean, it was the top team in my university.
The reason I ask is you're on, people, when they talk about my podcast, it usually gets labeled as a hockey podcast. So I didn't think having Calvin Ayre on was going to lead back to hockey. I didn't realize you played hockey at all. Well, I mean, being a Canadian kid, that's pretty much what you do as a pastime here through the darkest, coldest years of the month, or months a year.
That was actually my favorite sport growing up as a kid.
Was playing hockey.
Hockey was my favorite, yeah.
So did you get to Waterloo because of hockey then?
No. I went there because I was originally planning on becoming an optometrist, and I just went out, tried out for the team, and made the team.
So you wanted to be an optometrist?
Initially, but yeah, eventually. I took a few different paths through university, and I ended up with 2 degrees, one in sciences and one in finance.
So what changed? I guess I went to school to be a psychologist. That didn't pan out. So what changed?
Well, just look back. Who knows what they really want to be when they're 18? Apparently, some people do, and actually, I kind of think I did as well, because I sort of ended up where I felt I belonged in that I'm in business, and I kind of had this instinct that I'd be doing business stuff. But because I was good at sciences and physics and math and whatnot, and I had a physics professor in high school, and he talked me into. He said my aptitudes would be quite useful in being an eye doctor. So he talked me into becoming an eye doctor. And so I said, okay, I'm 18 years old. What do I know? And I went off to university to become an eye doctor. And I started taking business courses as electives as I was taking the science courses I needed for my optometry. And I fell in love with business. So I closed off that degree and then went back and took an MBA in management finance, and then started starting businesses.
Well, and I'd read a story on you that at a young age you bought a 5-ton truck and started selling fruit.
Yes, I did. When I was in my undergraduate years, for my summer job, I borrowed a truck, actually, my dad's pickup initially, and then rented a U-Haul trailer, painted up some signs, got a $3,000 loan from the credit union with my mom co-signed, and then went down to the south of Salmon Arm, where I was living at that time, and picked up a load of fruit into the U-Haul trailer and hauled it out to Saskatchewan and sold it on the side of the road. And I'd phone all my relatives and get them to phone all their friends, and they'd come by and box the fruit off me.
And you made good money doing that?
More than I would have made at minimum wage as a temporary employee for a summer, I think. And it was less time too. I would only work 2 months of the instead of the full 4 months. I would only work 2.
Did you, I assume, taking some money out, were you shitting bricks, so to speak, that your fruit might go to rot and you might not sell it?
It was nerve-wracking. And in fact, a few times I would have to take it to a local Hutterite colony and sell it at a discount just to get rid of it because it was getting too ripe. And then they would buy it bulk because they had a lot of people, and then they would can it up and prepare. They would start preparing it on the spot, but I'd have to give it to them really cheap. So that would be just to cover costs.
One other place that I heard you lived out here was Manville. I heard you'd lived there for a couple of years.
2 years. Yeah, 2 years. Yeah.
What you guys moved farms or?
Yeah, I was born in Lashburn and raised there till I can't even remember now. I think it was kindergarten and grade 1. I think I did there. And so we just moved over there and farmed for 2 years over there. And then my dad moved back onto my grandparents' farm in Saskatchewan. And when I was born, we were farming a farm close to that.
Do you still have family then around here, Kelvin? I
do, yeah. I actually probably have a pretty extended family, but none of my close relatives are there anymore. But I do have lots of extended family in the neighborhood.
So I guess what I'm digging at is you don't come back to this area very often then, if ever.
I have not been back there since my last close relative left. I went to visit, my sister was actually living there for a while, my older sister, and I went to visit her once. That was years ago now, and since then I haven't been back. But I still see some of the relatives from around there, though, because I actually had a family reunion in Langley on another ranch a few years back, and a bunch of them showed up. So,
when was the last time? This is probably the better question. When was the last time you were asked about Lashburn, Saskatchewan?
Asked about it, very, very seldom actually, because nobody's ever heard of it outside of Lashburn. So when people ask me where I'm from, I say Lloydminster, because at least some people know. Well, you can find it on a map. People know. More people will know it.
Well, I like to have that dig in there. I'm from Helmond. I'm from a smaller Saskatchewan town than Lashburn, so I get the Lloydminster, saying Lloydminster because people can find it. But that's a dig on my Lashburn folk that are listeners, and I don't mind teasing Lashburn that it's a small town as well.
Yeah. I don't even think it's got a hospital anymore, but there was one there when I was born. I was actually born in.
You were actually born in Lashburn.
In Lashburn, in the local hospital, yes. Yeah.
No kidding. There's not a local hospital in Lashburn anymore.
No, shortly after I was born, it was shut.
Well, you go through university. At what point do you start thinking about, the beginning of the internet is right around 1990-ish? What point do you start to have the idea of Bodog? I assume it didn't just fall in your lap.
Well, what happened is after my second university degree, I started a company called HQ Vancouver, which was kind of like a packaged office business. But instead of doing it the typical way, what I did is there was a router from the SFU from an SFU branch camp, Simon Fraser University branch campus. There was a router from the university backbone that preceded the internet in the basement of Harbor Center, where I had set this business up. And so I strung my own fiber down to it and connected to it. So I had inside my packaged office business, I had high-speed internet to the desktop, and it was the first place in the city of Vancouver that you could get it. And that university backbone, of course, connected to what was the start of the internet all over down the States and whatnot. So because I had that connectivity, I tracked all the internet startups of their day. So my packaged office business became the de facto internet startup place in Vancouver, and Cisco Systems set up their office for Western Canada out of my office. And just sort of really got into the whole really early on internet startup. And I came up with the idea. It wasn't even my first internet startup, the gaming stuff. I was working on some other businesses with other people who were clients of mine in my environment, helping them get their startups off the ground. So,
and did any of those create successful businesses, or were they flops?
I can't remember any of them that actually that were in my environment that became as successful as what I became. However, after I started what became Bodog, some of the companies that spun out of my company, like Unbounce, which is still in Vancouver and just announced some big $20 or $30 million raise, started by a couple of ex-Bodoggers. So I spawned some other tech companies in Vancouver. But of the earliest days, I mean, let's be honest, a lot of them were porn sites, and I didn't even know it at the time. They were coming in because the high-speed internet was cheap and available, and they were renting offices and filling them full of servers, and I knew it, but I didn't know what the heck they were doing. I found out later that, which is legal in Canada, pornography is not illegal, but there was a lot of early porn companies operating out of my environment, which I thought was kind of funny when I found it. But myself, at one point I read an article in a newspaper about sports betting being done by phone in the Dominican Republic. And that was sort of the light bulb moment. And I just said, hold on, what a great thing to be doing on the internet. And so I started building sports betting platform. And then sort of one thing led to another. And eventually it was this big, massive gaming company, which still exists today.
You kind of I was going to interrupt, and then I'm like, I want him to finish his thought here. So you're saying that the beginning of porn in Canada came out of your office? Not you specifically, but people.
Yeah, I'm not saying it was beginning in Canada, because presumably they were doing it in Toronto and Montreal as soon or sooner. But for sure, the earliest days of porn on the internet out of Vancouver all happened out of my office without me even knowing about it. They were clients of mine. They were just renting offices with service
no clue what's going on,
which included internet connection to this fiber that I'd extended to every office in my little incubator. And they filled their offices full of servers, and I didn't have a clue what they were doing. So yeah, pretty funny.
It's almost hard to go back to a time where the internet isn't what the internet is now. Like when I hear you talk about servers and stacking rooms full and, being high speed, you're just like, well, you can pretty much get high speed anywhere now. Even rural communities.
Not down here in Antigua, but we're working on that.
Oh, you don't have high speed out there?
Well, we do. Yeah, my office has it, and I have it here to my house. But there's a lot of places you can't get it yet on this island. It's pretty weak still. And
fair enough. Hillmond, Saskatchewan, where my parents are, doesn't have high speed internet. So I mean, it's not everywhere, but it has become very commonplace.
Yeah, for sure.
So why, when you hear the bookie taking bets, you go like, this could work? You go like, what was it about gambling that you're like, because I guess in the history of the world, gambling, heck, pornography, they kind of fall into the same like nightclub scenario. Did you ever think, man, if I go down this road, I don't know what comes of it?
No, actually, I never did. I find that sports betting, even though it's illegal in some places, is not considered sort of like a bad thing. Like you don't pretend that you bet on sports. Most people admit it and they're proud of
100%.
It. Kind of like what we do as men. So, and I grew up with sports betting. When I was saying that we used to play and gamble all the time on my hockey team, well, of course we used to bet on sports too. I didn't even bother saying that because that was, like, for me, it was a given. that's kind of how it started. And then the blackjack and poker was kind of like the things we did on top of it. But yeah, we used to, all through university betting, sports betting for cases of beer and stuff. I mean, just part of the culture in Canada. So I never really thought anything of it. And I knew that I could get sports betting licenses in other jurisdictions in the world. So yeah, I just started building the system. My original idea was to license it out, which I did. But then I got frustrated because I was trying to use my ideas of how sports betting should be done on the internet. And the people licensing my technology were like, yeah, you're the tech guy, let us run the business. And so they were ignoring me. So eventually I put my own site up and, tried all my own ideas, which were mostly marketing, not operations. And yeah, the rest is history, I guess.
Did, when you first had this idea, did you tell it to your friends and they were like, that's a great idea, you should do that?
I did tell it to my friends, but what I did is I asked everybody in my family, all my friends, what they thought. I said, I'm going to start a sports betting company on the internet. What do you think? Not one person thought it was a good idea. Everybody told me.
Why not? Why did they say it was a bad idea?
A lot of different reasons, but mostly it just sounded crazy. So one day I was at my place. I was living in Gastown at the time, walking distance away from my tech incubator. It's like 2 blocks away. And I just, in the morning, getting ready for work, I looked myself in the mirror and I said, you got to ask yourself a fundamental question. Everybody says you're wrong. It's a bad idea, but you think it's a good idea. You have to ask yourself a question. Would you rather be on your deathbed saying that you were too scared to try this? Or would you rather be on your deathbed saying I tried it and failed? And now, of course, the other option would be that you tried it and it worked. But nobody's scared of success. People are scared of failure. So I gave myself a worst case scenario. And I said, I'd rather have tried and failed than to admit that I was too scared to try. So I just went for it. And that was it.
Tough talk to yourself in the mirror, and it became a giant success. Looking back on that conversation you had then, if you could go back to when you look in the mirror, you feel like, man, I'm glad I had that conversation with myself.
Exactly. Yeah, that could have been a turning point, all right.
Well, how, like, you're sitting there and you're watching this, right? You create Bodog. Hey, first off, why Bodog? Why the name Bodog?
I was looking for a name that was, like, at the time, all the sports betting sites were names like Sports Bet, Sporting Bet, Bet on Sports, sportsbook.com. It's all the names ran together to the extent that even me in the industry, I had trouble keeping them all straight. So I wanted a name that stood out and was different. And so I came up with a full page of branding criteria. And then I went home one night and went on to Who's Is and was just making words up and searching to see if the root domain for .com was available, and seeing how many of the criteria they would tick. For instance, Bodog, it's got a cadence for radio ads, BODOG. So it kind of has a cadence to it when you spell it out. It's the way we did the logo with the small cases. It's 5 zeros, so it's very symmetric. It's very hard to forget the name and how it's spelled. And I forget all the other criteria right now, but there was like a number of criteria I had. So I came up with about 20 different names, and I saved them all, and I hand wrote them on a piece of paper, all the names, but I had saved them all, so I owned them. I actually had a credit card there and was grabbing them. And then I wasn't ready to launch. This was when I was already licensing my platform, but now I'm going to launch my own site, and I wanted to use all my marketing ideas, and this was actually one of them, to make it something different than what was out there. So I threw that sheet of paper into my desk at my office the next morning and went back to work, getting all the stuff ready to launch the site. And then at some point I had to pick the name. So I pulled the piece of paper out and just went down the list, and there was Bodog. It just jumped off the page at me, and I said, boom, there's the name. And that's how it came to be.
That's now maybe I'm obviously a little bit naive to think that companies just have I like the way this looks and that's what it's going to be. That's a very strategic way to pick a name.
Yeah. I put some thought into it for sure.
Did you read a book on that, or did you have some training on that? How did you create a list?
Already, because I'd been in business for a while, so I had already thought lots. And I have an MBA, right? So I haven't taken courses taking marketing courses and whatnot at a fairly advanced level. But I don't believe I read a book before I did that. I just picked my experience from all my education experience and came up with this list of how I thought it would work.
So what was the second place? What's the name that never got picked?
None of them are in my memory. Gone.
Really? Can't remember a single one?
Cannot remember a single one, which goes to show you that
Bodog was it.
Well, not only that, but you know why it's so important to be first. Otherwise, history forgets you.
Is that something you live by? You got to be first?
I think everybody does. I mean, being second is kind of good. You sort of brag about it a bit, but I mean, it's good to be first.
What was it like the day that you kind of woke up and looked and Bodog is just everywhere? It's like, I don't know, I assume you're on a runaway train and you're just holding on for dear life trying to keep hold of her.
Yeah. You know, I'm in an elevator in Miami once, and there's one of the girls that was one of our models, actually. She's wearing some Bodog branded stuff standing beside me, but no one could have known that we were together. And two other guys got on the elevator, and one guy sees the girl, and she's kind of cute, so he's like immediately trying to chat her up. He says, "Hey, what's Bodog mean?" His friend jumps in and explains what Bodog is. That was kind of like, it's pretty cool.
People know this.
Like just random people in an elevator in Miami. So yeah.
What do you do with $1 billion? Or
it's not how it
more
works.
more money than you could ever possibly spend?
Yeah, it's not how it works. It's because I mean, it's all tied up in businesses and projects and things that have plans. And I mean, I do a lot of charity, but nobody sits around. Well, at least not normal people that have money. Mostly people don't sit around with like lots of cash or liquid, assets in liquid form. Usually it's stuff that has a value, a breakup value that's being valued, but in reality, you're using it for some purpose, so you can't really break it up because it's going to screw up whatever the plan is.
I should rephrase then, because you come from a pig farm. At what point do you just wake up and you got a little bit of money in your account? That can be $20,000, that can be $1,000, but you look at it and you go, oh. And I don't know what day that is. Because billion, it just rolls off the tongue. It's more about, I get it's tied up in that kind of thing. But at one point you had to wake up and go, holy man.
Yeah, it didn't really happen like that because it was just so glacial. When you're actually living it, it was just, was incremental. And always there were so many challenges. And even now, I mean, I've got projects and some of them are businesses, but have ulterior aims. Like, for instance, the government of Antigua has asked me to work on some projects down here to create jobs in construction so that we can replace the tourism jobs that have been lost from the pandemic, especially on the lower end of tourism. So I'm up to my eyeballs in that, and it's being structured as a business, but I wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't for the government asking me to do my part to help create the economic stimulus so that people have jobs here. So yeah, so I just get wound up in my projects. So I don't really think about it that much. And like I said, it all happened so slow that it wasn't no big win the lottery moment. It was just incremental, and it was incremental with a lot of stress and hard work, which very few, like those euphoric win moments where you just win big things. That's not really how it worked.
How many years did it take then to you talk about the stress and the hard work? How many years did it take you to get to where Bodog was? You're sitting in an elevator and a guy's explaining it all and you're going, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, like, I wasn't really keeping that close a track, but I kind of look at my life as being a progression every step. So even stuff that predated Bodog was all training for the things that came later.
Yep.
So it's always just, for me, it's like I've been working on this my whole life, starting in, elementary school, training to get to where I am now. And each time I think, I'm there, then I seem to learn a new trick and break into some other new level. And all of a sudden feel like I'm still learning.
How difficult then was it to have the U.S. government try and, I don't know what the right word is, Kelvin. You lived it.
Well, let me explain what happened, first of all.
Sure.
It was painful, and particularly from a credibility perspective with people that were relying on me. But the reality was that, I had a license to operate gaming here in Antigua, and under an existing free trade agreement with the United States, that license, which has been ratified 3 times by the World Trade Organization in arbitration between Antigua and the United States, my license allowed me to do what I was doing up in the United States. So how it's supposed to work with any other country but the United States, I mean, it's up to them to make sure that their domestic laws conform with their international trade obligations. And in this case, the United States, which I now realize the United States does whatever it wants and kind of doesn't really follow the rules. They want everybody else to follow the rules, but they don't. What happened was the U.S.'s international trade obligations, which I was in compliance with, were in conflict with some of their domestic laws, and they didn't do their part in stopping their domestic laws from interfering with their international agreements. So, in fact, I was a victim of U.S. not following the system correctly. And eventually I had to settle with them on terms that weren't which victimized me slightly when you look at what really happened. But it was a settlement I could live with, so I'm happy to get that out of my life. But I certainly don't begrudge any people in the United States, because at the end of the day, the prosecutors I was dealing with were just doing their jobs. The fault lies with what happened to me with the federal level, which is under the Obama administration. I mean, they were the ones that should have stepped in and stopped that process from happening and allowed their international obligations to be dominant. However, that all said, I landed on my feet, and here I am, and I don't really have any grudges to anybody. I still think that's going through life, you got to expect a few lumps, right? Just like playing hockey.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Your lumps are, for a guy sitting in Lloydminster, Saskatchewan, Alberta, the border city, it's, you listen to it and you're like, man, that's a giant lump.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. But like I said, I got through it, and yeah, I'm okay now.
Was there some tough days in the middle of that then, with to have a government come after you, to be...
Well, you certainly find out who your friends are, that's for sure.
Yeah, has that made those relationships stronger then, is what you're saying?
Absolutely. And one of my friends was the government of Antigua and the government of Canada. Actually, both the federal government of Canada and Antigua supported me and understood that my situation wasn't cut and dry like it was portrayed in the media by the U.S.
Yeah, it's interesting because, if you were just a small little betting site, you might have got attacked. But, I think I read 7.3 billion in online bets in 2005.
Yeah.
Like that's a hard number to even comprehend. And that's probably why the US is like, well, they want a piece of that. Yeah. They can't have that leaving the country, I assume.
Well, under international law, in fact, I was within my rights to be doing that. But, like I said, it worked itself out in a satisfactory way.
Do you miss the Bodog days?
I do. But I don't think I could do them now. I mean, that was a lot of energy. I like the stuff I'm working on now, so I'm pretty happy with where I am now.
What do you mean a lot of energy?
I was just literally like being on a never-ending treadmill. It just was go, and it was all the operation stuff, and then we started doing all the promotions, all the celebrity events in the United States, Europe, down in Latin America. It was just nonstop.
What were some of the celebrity events you did?
We did celebrity events in LA with the Lakers. We did ones in New York and Vegas, lots of stuff in Vegas, Phoenix.
When you talk about the Lakers specifically, like you just mean at a game you did something, or you had like a...
Yeah, we did a lot of stuff with the Lakers, and I actually did stuff. I did presentations, charity presentations, center court in Lakers games, and then we did a inner city youth charity night. Jerry Buss, the previous owner, and myself. And honestly, I did so much stuff like that at that time, I probably can't even remember it all. So it was like...
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was constant. I threw a birthday party for Shaq O'Neal in Phoenix after one of his games. Mike Tyson came to that.
How was that? You're sitting there and there's Shaquille O'Neal and Mike Tyson, where you're just like, how did I get to this point?
Yeah. There were surreal moments, like, and Bruce Willis came to my party in New York because it was.
What you say there were some surreal moments. What was one of the surreal moments that you put your finger on back in the day? You're like,
it's hard to really remember them, but there was those moments where you just go, wow. But then the majority of it just started to blend together and become just, oh yeah, well, this is just normal. So then every now and then you go, wow, this isn't really normal. And then you get back, head down, get working on your stuff, and then it's all kind of normal again. So
What you mentioned charity events, and you've mentioned it a couple times, and it sounds like that's become a strong thing for you. What are some things you're doing there? And I assume that doesn't get as much publicity as other things. So what are some things you've done that side of the coin?
Well, I do a lot of charity, most of it in Antigua now, because this is where I live, and helping with education for people from lower income brackets, sponsoring athletes. I sponsor their football club, or pardon me, I sponsor scholarships for football players to get scholarships up in the U.S. And the local basketball team, and I bought the hyperbaric chamber here. And since the pandemic, I've been doing a lot of stuff because Antigua needs help. So I airlifted a whole plane load of PPE, personal protective equipment, from in here for the hospital. And I'm the major sponsor of the food program for all the people that have lost their jobs that were tied to tourism that's just disappeared. And yeah, I'm sponsoring building some houses from hurricane relief in the sister island of Barbuda with Prince Charles, actually. Him and I are partnering on that. So yeah, I'm just trying to do my part here in Antigua.
Cool. Well, I'm watching the time closely because I know time is the going currency for everyone. So I've had you on for roughly half an hour. Do I have you for a couple more minutes, or is it time to...
I will give you a few more minutes, but I do have to go because if you can believe it, I actually am doing another interview in Saskatchewan with somebody named Charleston Hughes. You know?
Really?
Yeah.
How is it that you got 2 Saskatchewan interviews on the same day?
And I haven't done one of these in 10 years, I bet, with anybody from Saskatchewan. So, but yeah, well, Ed organized it, so I actually don't know the details. But yeah, I have 2 with Saskatchewan in the same day.
Geez, small world.
Yeah. I don't know. They showed up in my calendar, so.
Fair. Well, we'll get right to the final 5 then. That way I can get you on your way and I don't have to hold you up. It's just Crewmaster Final 5s, 5 quick questions, long or short as you want to go on them, and I'll get you on your way. So the first one is there something that you have left on your bucket list? Because, I mean, you're a guy who's had basically whatever he wants for a very long time. Is there something that eludes you that you'd like to finish off?
Yeah, I've always been a big fan of building stuff. I've like built and designed a lot of my own homes. So, and I've mostly been a tech startup or tech investor most of my professional career. And real estate's kind of been an afterthought where I just indulge myself a little bit by designing homes or investing in the odd piece of real estate. But I actually like being a real estate developer. So I'm actually working right now here in Antigua on some plans to, and it was actually, I'll give the Prime Minister and the people of Antigua sort of like a little bit of credit for pushing me in this direction, because now the pandemic has created so much economic problems that I was getting pressure from various sources here to do some investment here and create some construction jobs. But so I started down that road, and I'm kind of actually enjoying myself. So I kind of feel like there's kind of a new chapter coming here. So hope they enjoy it as much as I think I will.
Oh, cool. Another thing that you've been heavily involved with is, and this is question number 2, is Bitcoin. Your social media is all about Bitcoin. What is it about Bitcoin that has you hooked in? Or is that a long question?
No. You know, I was there at the creation of the online gaming industry, and now I'm creating another industry. So it kind of fits with my background. And the industry that I'm creating, though, isn't using cryptocurrencies, because Bitcoin, as originally designed, which is what I'm involved with, which is the original protocol, it's not a cryptocurrency. It's actually a way of valuing data. And the MetaNet, which is a version of Bitcoin that's designed to sit on top of the internet, will allow us to do everything that the internet currently does, but by assigning value and microtransaction value to all data. And this creates amazing opportunities for enterprise solutions for problems at massive scale. And that doesn't exist with any of the cryptocurrencies because they don't scale. So what I'm trying to do is educate people on the superpowers of the original Bitcoin protocol and the real world problems it can solve. And that's what gets me motivated right now. So I'm really having a lot of fun with that. But there's just so much misinformation out there that it's really a tough slug because so many people are confused. And the people in these other protocol camps, for whatever reason, they can't do what we do, but at the same time, they're treating us like we're a threat when we're not. We don't compete at any level really because the stuff we do is just so distinct.
So you foresee a day though when that takes over the currency of the world?
It doesn't have to be successful. What it will do is take over the internet, and it will allow us. The technology could still be valued, denominated in fiat. Fiat currencies could still exist. But the underlying technology, managing it all and how we all do things on the internet will all have a Bitcoin layer on top of it called the metanet.
Interesting.
And I do believe the metanet is going to be as ubiquitous in a few years as the internet is today. And in fact, it's going to bury the internet. And so, or possibly we will still call it the internet, but really it'll be the metanet. I don't know, but it's going to be there between us and the internet. And we're going to be using the metanet like we use the internet today, except with a bunch of superpowers.
As a consumer, just a person who hops on, are you going to notice, do you think you're going to have like noticeable changes then? Or is it going to just feel exactly like how it feels today?
It's noticeable, but one of the things that's got to happen is it's got to get a lot more user friendly, and that's going to happen. If you remember the early stages of the internet, which I do, because the internet was hard to use too, and then Mosaic came along, and all of a sudden it got simpler, and then progressed from there. And that's happening very quickly with metanet applications as well. But this will open up a whole bunch of new types of things that you can do that can't exist right now. And so when 10 years from now, when you're in that world and you look back, you're going to be like, wow, I can't believe you didn't be able to before. You couldn't do this thing.
When you say you couldn't do this thing, what do you mean?
Well,
what's something that we can't do on the internet?
Do not exist in the world today, except for on the protocol that I'm working with. You cannot pay 1/10 of a penny to do something on the internet. There's no payment mechanism that scales to include every transaction in the universe, like massively scales, almost infinitely scales, that at the same time allows you to do frictionless micropayments. The only technology in the world can do that is the one that I'm involved with, and that opens up a whole bunch of different possibilities. You can put a value to every speck of data that ever gets passed around. No more advertisers, because you're paying. Advertising model disappears. That's what I'm working on.
Oh, that's got to hurt the old brain. So you're saying that whatever data you use on the internet would cost you a fraction of a penny or a fraction of whatever it is.
You can monetize it all. Right now, you're giving people like Facebook all your data, and then they give you something that they make you seem like it's free, but really they're abusing your private data. In the future, you can just use microtransactions to control your own data and still get the same service that you're getting from Facebook, but without having to give up data unless you're selling it. You can sell it to them and they can give you money for it.
And then they can give you money for it.
Or you could decide to keep all your data and just pay using micropayments. You can just pay for what little things you do, pay as you go. And there's only one technology in the world that can do that right now, and that's Bitcoin BSV.
Interesting. Well, I'll be very interested to see where that goes. That is something new. I've never heard that before.
Yeah. Well, yeah. A lot of people are distracted by all this cryptocurrency nonsense that's out there, which is all going to disappear over time.
Here's a question. The next one is, I enjoy sitting down with people, obviously. I enjoy sitting down with people that are successful. Henceforth, you coming on being from having ties to this area. Who's one person, if you could sit down with tomorrow, you'd like to sit down and have a coffee, a beer, a tequila, whatever it is your fancy?
That's a tough question. I mean, when I was younger, I used to always say Richard Branson was a guy that I'd like to meet, but I assume that fairly soon, given how much business I do in London and the way our spheres of industry overlap, that at some point I'm actually going to meet the guy on its own. But I used to really have a lot of respect for Richard Branson because of his branding and marketing skills, which I borrowed from actually in my younger years. But I don't really have anybody on that list right now anymore. I kind of met a lot of people that I kind of looked up to over the years. So,
Who's one of the guys you met that you looked up to?
Bruce Willis. I told you he came to my party. That was pretty cool.
Bruce Willis. What did Bruce Willis have to say?
He's just a calm guy. I've always appreciated his movies, so I thought that was kind of fun. And he lived up to the billing. He was actually, pretty cool guy. Some of the celebrities I met were kind of not the same person as you'd expect they'd be, in real life. But he was kind of his matched his movie character a little bit, persona.
Sorry. Nope.
Yeah. So Magic Johnson was another guy that was pretty inspiring to meet because it was after he'd been diagnosed with AIDS, and at the time it was supposed to be a death sentence, and how positive he was and stuff. So there's a lot of cool people. Kobe Bryant is a pretty cool guy to meet. He looks a lot bigger in real life than he does out in the basketball court with all those giants out there. I can tell you that.
Yeah, well, all those guys in the NBA are pretty big now, aren't they?
Certainly are.
What's one Bodog event that you never got to have happen, or idea? One thing you're like, I wish we could have pulled this off, but it never went. Because I mean, you did. Man, I just watched Chael Sonnen talk about Bodog fights, and until he talked about it, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. I honestly don't think that there was any big ticket item. I mean, we when we were rolling there, when we had ideas, we kind of experimented and dabbled with a lot of stuff. So we kind of, the stuff that I thought was going to be fun, we just kind of did it. So there wasn't really any one thing that I wish I would have done. I mean, we started conferences. I still do conferences now in cryptocurrency or in Bitcoin space, but we started with the Bodog conferences. I did my branded fight stuff. I did my branded poker stuff. I even did a Bodog branded Battle of the Bands show series. So yeah, we did a lot of stuff. Had Snoop Dogg as a highlighter for my Poker for the Troops TV special in Hawaii. That was kind of fun. I sometimes forget all the stuff that I've done.
Well, you've been a busy man.
My friend, I'm going to have to call it quits.
Sure. Well, I appreciate it. I thank you for your time of sitting down with me and chatting. All the best in the future.
Okay. Cheers. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. Hey folks, thanks again for joining us today. If you just stumble on the show and like what you hear, please click subscribe. Remember, every Monday and Wednesday, a new guest will be sitting down to share their story. The Sean Newman Podcast is available for free on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever else you find your podcast fix. Until next time.